You already lost the case.
They thought silence meant surrender. They thought the woman sitting motionless at the defense table had already lost. Her voice, her children, her future. They mistook stillness for weakness. They mistook patience for fear. That was their first mistake. The second mistake was believing the courtroom belonged to them, because long before the judge lifted his gavel, long before the lawyers sharpened their words, long before the cameras arrived hungry for blood, she had already decided how this would end. The clock on the courtroom wall clicked loudly as it crept toward noon. Tick, tick, tick. Each second echoed like a countdown. Courtroom 4B was cold in the way government buildings always were. Over-air-conditioned, stripped of warmth, designed to make people small. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing like insects trapped inside glass. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, old paper, and quiet panic. Every bench was full. Journalists lined the back rows, fingers twitching over phones, waiting for the moment the billionaire's ex-wife finally cracked. Social media was already primed, hashtags drafted, headlines pre-written. Silent wife loses everything. Billionaire keeps kids, courtroom meltdown expected. But the meltdown never came, because Grace didn't move. She sat perfectly still in her plain gray dress, hands folded neatly, spine straight, eyes forward. Not slumped, not trembling, just quiet. Too quiet. Across the aisle, her ex-husband looked like he owned the building. Howard Archibald lounged back in his chair, as if this were a board meeting he was mildly bored of. His suit was tailored within an inch of its life, Italian wool, custom cufflinks glinting under the lights. His jaw was relaxed, his smile faint but confident. This was his habitat. Money had trained him well. Money had taught him that rooms bent around him, that rules softened, that people spoke carefully when he entered, that consequences were for other men, and today would be no different. Beside him sat Arthur Danton, his attorney, his executioner. The man whispered about in legal circles like a myth. Danton didn't defend clients, he dismantled opponents. Careers ended in rooms like this when he stood up. On the bench behind them sat Vanessa. Young, beautiful, immaculately dressed in cream and gold, hands clasped tightly around a designer handbag she had never needed to earn. She watched Grace with a look that was equal parts curiosity and contempt, like someone studying a defeated animal. She hasn't spoken once, Vanessa murmured to the woman beside her, not bothering to whisper. That's not strength. That's guilt. Howard didn't correct her. He didn't need to, because everyone believed it. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the docket. Mr. Danton, he said, voice flat, tired. You may proceed with your closing arguments regarding custody and assets. Danton rose smoothly. This was his moment. Thank you, Your Honor. His voice carried easily, polished and surgical. We are here because the court must determine what environment best serves two minor children. And while divorce is never pleasant, facts remain facts. He paced slowly, deliberately, like a predator circling. My client provides stability, structure, resources, education, a future. He gestured toward Grace without looking at her. The respondent, unfortunately, offers none of these. A pause, just long enough to let the words sink in. She has no consistent income, no permanent residence of equal standing, no demonstrated ambition to improve her circumstances. Howard lowered his gaze, playing the role perfectly, reluctant benefactor burdened by responsibility. Danton continued. We've heard testimony from nannies, household staff, tutors. A consistent pattern emerges. Emotional distance, neglect, disengagement. He turned to the jury box. Is that who we entrust children to? Grace didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't react. The silence unnerved some people. Others mistook it for defeat. In the gallery, whispers grew louder. She's done. She knows she lost. She doesn't even care. Vanessa smirked. Howard glanced at his watch. He had lunch reservations. When Grace's attorney finally stood, it felt like an afterthought. Sarah Jenkins, young, underpaid, court-appointed. Her suit was slightly too big. Her voice lacked the confidence the room demanded. "Your Honor," she began, "my client disputes the credibility of witnesses currently employed by Mr. Archibald." "Objection," Danton snapped. "Speculation." "Sustained," Judge Holloway said almost instantly. "Move on, Ms. Jenkins." Sarah swallowed. She glanced at Grace, desperation flickering across her face. Grace didn't look back. She stared straight ahead at the state seal mounted high on the wall. Sarah tried again, and failed again. Within minutes, it was over. Custody arguments closed. The momentum was gone. The room leaned toward inevitability. Then came the finances, Howard's favorite subject. This was where men like him turned invisible wealth into smoke. Howard took the stand easily, like someone accustomed to microphones. "Mr. Archibald," Danton said gently, "can you explain your current financial position to the court?" Howard sighed. A performance worthy of awards. "The market has been volatile," he said. "Most of my assets are tied up long-term, illiquid. I've taken significant losses." He shook his head. "It's been a difficult year." The jury nodded. Of course it had. He was rich. That meant suffering looked different. "And liquid funds?" Danton prompted. "Minimal," Howard replied. "Barely enough to maintain operations." Grace's fingers tapped once on the table. Tap. No one noticed. "And the offshore accounts?" Danton asked smoothly. Allegations were made. Howard laughed softly. "Fiction. I bank domestically, always have." He looked at Grace for the first time. "She's confused." Judge Holloway made a note. Grace's tapping stopped. "Cross-examination?" the judge asked. Sarah stood up. Grace's hand shot out. "No." The word cut through the room like a blade. Head snapped toward her. Judge Holloway frowned. "Ms. Corey, you are represented by counsel." "I know," Grace said calmly as she stood. "But I'm finished being represented." A ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom. Danton smiled. Here it was, the breakdown. Grace stepped forward, not toward the witness stand, but toward the center of the room. "I'd like to speak for myself," she said. Danton laughed quietly. "Your Honor." "I'll allow it," the judge said, curiosity overtaking boredom. "Briefly." Grace nodded. She turned, not toward Howard, but toward the judge. "There's something my ex-husband failed to mention," she said. Howard rolled his eyes. "Here we go." Grace inhaled slowly. "Before I was a wife, before I was a mother, I had a profession." Howard frowned. He genuinely couldn't remember. "I was an archivist," Grace continued, "specializing in digital records." Danton scoffed. "Relevance?" "Encrypted data," Grace added. "Deleted files. Financial trails designed to disappear." The room stilled. Howard's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. "I'm very good at finding things people believe are gone forever." She reached into her purse, pulled out a black USB drive. "And I don't speak until the lie is complete." Gasps erupted. Danton leapt to his feet. "Objection. This is ambush." "I submitted it this morning," Grace said calmly. "Under seal. Emergency review." The bailiff handed the judge an envelope. Judge Holloway opened it, plugged the drive in, scrolled. His face changed. Howard leaned toward Danton. "What's on that?" he whispered. Danton didn't answer. The judge looked up slowly. "Mr. Archibald," he said, voice low, "according to these records, you control $75 million through a shell corporation registered under your fiancé's name." Vanessa screamed. The courtroom exploded. But Grace wasn't finished. "That's not the question that matters," she said. The judge looked at her. "What question does?" Grace turned, pointed at Howard. "Ask him where he was on October 14th. Howard froze. The room went silent. Judge Holloway checked the file. "The night your son was hospitalized," he said slowly. Howard swallowed. I was at a gala. Grace's voice didn't shake. Play the recording. The audio crackled. Then a door slammed. Then a child cried. Then a sound no parent ever forgets. The courtroom collapsed into horror. When it ended, no one spoke. Judge Holloway removed his glasses. Howard stood, screaming. It's fake! The gavel slammed. Sit. Down. Officers moved. Howard lunged. Handcuffs clicked. As they dragged him past Grace, he hissed, You think this is over? Grace didn't move. She watched him go. Calm. Silent. Waiting. Because this was only the beginning. Power doesn't disappear when it's exposed. It mutates. It retreats. It waits. And when it believes no one is watching, it strikes back. That was the mistake everyone made after the courtroom emptied. They thought it was over. Howard Archibald didn't hear the reporters anymore, didn't hear the shouting, didn't hear his name being torn apart by mouths that had praised him just days earlier. All he could hear was the echo. That recording, that child's cry, that single unforgivable sound that now lived inside his skull. The bailiff's grip was firm as iron as they guided him through the side corridor, away from the cameras, away from the public humiliation. His cuffed hands trembled, not with fear but with rage so concentrated it felt surgical. This isn't real, he muttered. This is fabricated, AI-generated. I'll prove it. No one answered. No one ever did anymore. The holding room was small, beige walls, a metal bench bolted to the floor, the kind of room where men who believed themselves untouchable were forced to sit with their thoughts. Howard paced, back and forth, back and forth. She planned this, he whispered to himself. This wasn't reactive. This was designed. That realization hit harder than the arrest, because if Grace had planned it, then she had known far more than he ever suspected, and that terrified him. Right, the Grace didn't cry when the doors closed behind her, didn't sag with relief, didn't collapse into Sarah's arms like everyone expected. She simply exhaled, a long, steady breath she had been holding for years. Outside the courtroom, the hallway was chaos. Microphones shoved forward, cameras flashing, questions colliding over one another. Miss Corey, did you plan this? How long did you know? Is your ex-husband abusive? Grace stopped, put on her sunglasses, and spoke exactly 7 words. My children are safe, that's all. Then she walked away, not fast, not slow, precisely controlled, because predators only chase what runs. That night, Grace didn't go home. She didn't return to her apartment, didn't check into a hotel, didn't call friends. She went somewhere else, a place she hadn't stepped foot in for over a decade. The old storage unit sat at the edge of the city, tucked between a shuttered laundromat and an abandoned auto shop. The sign flickered overhead, half lit like a dying warning. Grace unlocked Unit 317. The door groaned as it rolled up. Inside was order. Not clutter, not chaos, order. Metal shelves lined the walls, each box labeled in neat handwriting. Dates, names, categories, financial, pre-marriage financial, post-marriage communications, audio backups, redundancy. At the center sat a folding table, and on it a laptop. Grace powered it on. The screen illuminated her face, calm, unreadable. She opened a folder. Archer Project inside were subfolders, some already marked used, others still untouched. She hovered her cursor over one. Not yet. Soon. Howard was released on temporary bond 48 hours later. $10 million, paid without hesitation, because money still obeyed him, for now. The house arrest ankle monitor was an insult, but one he tolerated. The penthouse felt different when he returned. Too quiet, too large, too empty. Vanessa was gone. Her clothes vanished, her jewelry missing. Even the scent she left behind, expensive, artificial, had faded. On the kitchen island sat a single envelope. Howard ripped it open. I told them everything. Don't contact me. This isn't my problem anymore. He crushed the paper in his fist. Coward, he spat. But even as he said it, a deeper fear surfaced. Vanessa hadn't been loyal, which meant others wouldn't be either. He moved to his office, powered up his desktop. Access denied. He frowned, typed again. Denied. His phone buzzed. A message from the board. Emergency meeting. Tomorrow. Mandatory. Howard stared at the screen. That wasn't normal. He was the meeting. Across the city, Grace sat in a darkened room, watching security feeds on her laptop. Not from Howard's penthouse. From somewhere else. She watched him pace. Watched him shout. Watched him slam his fist against marble countertops he had once bragged about. Grace paused the feed. Zoomed in. Not on his face. On the walls. On the corners. On the reflections. Because that's where lies hide. She smiled faintly. He still hadn't found the cameras. The boardroom the next morning felt colder than the courtroom ever had. Howard entered with forced confidence, jaw set, shoulders back, but something was wrong. Eyes avoided his. Seats shifted. Silence lingered too long. Then the doors opened again. Grace walked in, not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as something else entirely. She wore black, tailored, precise, controlled. Howard's breath caught. "What the hell is she doing here?" he snapped. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Corey is here in an advisory capacity." Howard laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "This is my company." Grace didn't look at him. She placed a folder on the table, then another, one in front of every board member. "I funded this company," she said calmly, "before it had a name." Howard froze. "That's impossible." Grace finally met his eyes. "Read page 7. The chairman opened the folder, went pale. Howard lunged forward. "What is this?" "Ownership," Grace replied. "Silent shares, voting shares, acquired legally." Howard's mind raced. No, he remembered now, the early days. The anonymous seed money. The trust he never investigated, because he never thought it mattered. 51%, the chairman said quietly. The room erupted. Howard backed away slowly. "You planned this," he whispered. Grace didn't deny it. "I waited," she said, "just like I did in court." Security stepped forward. Howard's voice broke. "You can't erase me." Grace leaned in. "I don't need to." She tapped the folder. "You erased yourself." That night, Howard sat alone in the dark. No lights, no music, just the glow of the city outside. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. "You underestimated me," Grace said calmly. "I'm not finished," he snarled. "I know," she replied. That was the most frightening part. Because she sounded prepared. Empires don't fall the way movies pretend they do. There's no explosion. No single scream, no dramatic final blow. They rot first, from the inside. Howard Archibald woke up at 4:17 a.m. Not because of a nightmare. Because his body knew something his mind hadn't fully accepted yet. Something was wrong. The penthouse was silent in a way that felt unnatural, like a soundproof room where even breathing felt loud. The city lights outside blinked steadily, indifferent to the fact that a man who once believed himself untouchable was unraveling in the dark. Howard sat up. His ankle monitor blinked red. House arrest. A leash. He stared at it with open hatred. "I built cities," he muttered, "and now I need permission to walk to my own kitchen." He swung his legs off the bed and stood, muscles tight, jaw clenched. Today was the board's vote. Today was supposed to be the day he reclaimed control, because this humiliation, this interruption, was temporary. It had to be. At 8:59 a.m., Archibald Pharmaceuticals stock opened down 12%. At 9:01, it dropped another 4%. At 9:03, trading was briefly halted. Howard stood frozen in front of the massive screen in his office, watching numbers bleed red like open wounds. "What the hell is happening?" he barked into the phone. The CFO's voice on the other end was tight. "There was a data release this morning." "What data?" A pause. "The real data." Howard's stomach dropped. Grace Corey sipped her coffee slowly as the press conference went live. She didn't rush, didn't fidget, didn't smile. Behind her, the company logo glowed on a massive screen. But something was different. The name had changed. Corey Biosciences. Reporters leaned forward instinctively, sensing blood in the water. Grace waited until the room settled. Then she spoke. For years, this company told the public a story, she said evenly. A story about innovation, safety, and integrity. She clicked a remote. Graphs appeared. Clinical trial timelines. Side effect suppression logs. Internal emails. The truth, Grace continued, was archived, buried, delayed. A murmur rippled through the room. We are releasing the full data set today, unedited, unfiltered. Someone shouted, "Who authorized this?" Grace met the question without blinking. I did. The room erupted. Won't this tank your valuation? Are you admitting negligence? Is this retaliation against your ex-husband? Grace raised one hand. Silence followed. Transparency is not retaliation, she said. It's correction. She paused. And accountability is overdue. Howard slammed his phone onto the desk. She's killing the company, he shouted at no one. His lawyer's voice echoed in his head from the night before. Public sympathy has shifted. The narrative is no longer in your favor. Howard laughed bitterly. Narrative. He had owned narratives. He had shaped markets with a sentence. And now a woman he had dismissed as quiet, obedient, invisible was dismantling him with spreadsheets and timestamps. His phone buzzed again. A message from the board. Emergency vote passed. Effective immediately, you are removed as CEO. Howard stared at the words. Removed. The room tilted. No, he whispered. No, no, no. He threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. This wasn't happening. It couldn't. But Grace didn't attend the board vote. She didn't need to. She sat in a private office across town, watching the live feed with her legal team. Sarah Jenkins, no longer overwhelmed, no longer unsure, stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes sharp. He's spiraling, Sarah said quietly. Grace nodded. That's when people make mistakes. She clicked open another folder. Archer Project, Stage 3. Inside were files labeled Financial Irregularities, Tax Evasion, Crypto Trails, Foreign Accounts. Grace selected one. Not all of them. Just enough. Send this to the SEC, she said. Sarah hesitated. All of it? Grace shook her head. Not yet. Patience. Howard's penthouse felt smaller every hour. The walls closed in. The silence pressed. He paced like a caged animal, replaying every conversation, every overlooked detail. I let him think I was stupid. The words echoed in his skull. She watched me, he whispered. The cameras, the files, the trust. How long? How long had she been collecting him like evidence? He poured himself a drink. Didn't taste it. His hands shook. For the first time, Howard Archibald felt something he had never truly known before. Not fear. Exposure. And that afternoon, the subpoena arrived. Then another. Then another. Tax authorities, federal investigators, regulatory agencies. Each envelope heavier than the last. Each seal a promise of pain. Howard tore them open with trembling hands. His name looked different in print now, smaller, accused, criminal. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Hello? Howard? Grace said. He closed his eyes. What do you want? He spat. To warn you, she replied calmly. About what? There's a difference between losing control and losing protection. He laughed bitterly. You think I don't have allies? I think, Grace said softly. You confused leverage with loyalty. The line went dead. By evening, the news cycle had turned vicious. Billionaire CEO fired, data cover-up exposed, pharma giant admits suppressed side effects. Ex-wife turned chairwoman releases full records. Howard watched from his couch, hollow-eyed. They used his old photos, smiling, confident, untouchable. Now they played them beside words like fraud and endangerment. The anchors didn't shout. They didn't need to. The facts were louder. Right. Grace stood alone in her office after dark. The building was quiet. The city glowed below. She opened a final file. Archer Project, personal inside, was one item. An audio file. Not the courtroom recording. Something else. Something older. She hovered over it. Not yet. She closed the laptop. Tomorrow. Because tomorrow was when Howard would finally understand. This wasn't revenge. It was curation. Prison doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar or threaten or explain. It simply closes. And once it does, the world you used to rule becomes a rumor no one cares about. Howard Archerold learned that on his third night inside, not the first. The first night was shock. The second was denial. The third was when reality settled into his bones like damp cold. The holding cell smelled of metal, sweat, and old fear. Fluorescent lights never dimmed. Time lost meaning because there was nothing to measure it against. No meetings, no calls worth answering, no one waiting. The jumpsuit itched, the mattress was thin, and the silence, when it came, was worse than the noise. Howard lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, listening to distant shouts echo through concrete corridors. Somewhere down the block, someone screamed. Somewhere else, someone laughed too hard. He had once slept on Egyptian cotton. Now he slept beside men who didn't ask what you used to be. They only cared about what you were now. At intake, they didn't call him Howard. They called him Inmate 447921. No title, no last name, no hesitation. The guard barely looked at him. Hands out. Turn. Open your mouth. Howard obeyed. That was the first crack. Not the cuffs, not the charges, not even the headlines. Obedience. It tasted bitter. The rumors found him before he found them. They always did. By day 2, the whispers had started. That's him. The rich one. Child case. Heard he used to own a company. Howard kept his eyes forward. Didn't engage. Didn't react. He had spent his entire life mastering dominance through silence. But prison silence wasn't power. It was vulnerability. And predators could smell it. The first confrontation came in the cafeteria. The room was loud, plastic trays slamming, voices overlapping, guards barking half-hearted warnings. Howard scanned the space, heart pounding, calculating where to sit like it was a hostile negotiation. He chose an empty corner. Mistake. A man slid into the seat across from him. Large, scarred, calm. Never sit alone, the man said casually, biting into an apple. Makes you look like you think you're better. Howard didn't respond. The man smiled. I know who you are. Howard's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. The man leaned closer. I know you don't sleep at night. Howard froze. I know you check over your shoulder even when there's nowhere to run. A pause. And I know what they say you did. Howard stood abruptly. I'm not staying here. The man laughed. None of us are. Howard walked away. His hands were shaking. That night, he dreamed of walls closing in, of voices whispering his name, of Grace standing behind glass, watching, silent as always. He woke up gasping, sweat soaked through the thin mattress, and for the first time, he whispered something he had never said before. I need help. The darkness didn't answer. Days blurred. Meals, counts, lockdowns. Howard stopped tracking time because each day felt like a punishment stretched thin. His lawyers visited less. Their confidence drained with each conversation. Public sentiment is hostile, one of them admitted. The evidence is extensive, Howard snapped. She manipulated it. The lawyer hesitated. Even if that were true, the paper trail predates the divorce by years. Howard stared at him. Years. That meant She was planning this while we were married, he said slowly. The lawyer didn't deny it. Howard laughed then, a broken, hollow sound. She was sitting across from me at dinner, he whispered. Smiling, listening, waiting. The lawyer gathered his papers. We'll be in touch. They weren't. The first fight wasn't dramatic. No punches, just pressure. Howard returned to his cell one evening to find his mattress gone, his photos torn, his commissary emptied, a note scratched into the wall above his bunk. Money doesn't buy silence here. He slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor, breathing shallow, heart racing. He wanted to scream. Instead, he laughed again, because he finally understood. Grace hadn't just taken his freedom. She had placed him in a world where everything he used to be was a liability. The guards didn't protect him. They observed. Protection was earned. Howard had nothing to offer. By week 2, he stopped speaking unless spoken to. By week 3, he stopped meeting eyes. By week 4, he stopped correcting people when they got his name wrong. Hey, someone said once. What did they call you again? Howard opened his mouth, paused, then shrugged. Doesn't matter. And it didn't. The letter arrived without warning. No return address, just his name, handwritten. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single page, and a drawing. Crayon. A child's drawing. A green monster. Howard's breath caught. He recognized it instantly. He had seen it before. In court. Grace's handwriting beneath it. He doesn't wake up screaming anymore. Howard pressed the paper to his chest. For a moment, just one, something inside him collapsed. Not anger, not rage, regret, pure and devastating. Then the cell door slammed shut for count. The moment passed, and the weight returned. The paranoia came next. Howard began to hear Grace everywhere, in footsteps behind him, in distant laughter, in the scrape of chairs on concrete. Every system failure felt intentional. Every delay felt designed. Because deep down he knew the truth. This wasn't chaos. This was architecture. She had built this ending carefully, patiently, piece by piece. One evening, as he lay staring at the ceiling, a guard stopped outside his cell. You've got a visitor tomorrow, the guard said. Howard sat up. Who? The guard smirked. Someone you know. Hope flared. Stupid, dangerous hope. Grace, it had to be. He didn't sleep at all that night. The visiting room smelled like disinfectant and old breath. Howard noticed that first. Not the guards. Not the glass. Not the way the chair was bolted to the floor like even furniture needed to be restrained. The smell. It reminded him that this place wasn't temporary. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was where things ended. He sat down slowly, hands folded the way he'd once folded them in court, out of habit, not composure. His reflection stared back at him in the thick plexiglass. Thinner face, hollowed eyes, gray threading through hair that used to be perfect. The door on the opposite side opened. Grace walked in. Not dramatic, not rushed, not hesitant. She wore jeans, a simple white blouse. No jewelry, no armor. That somehow terrified him more than power ever had. She sat, picked up the phone, waited. Howard's hands shook as he lifted his receiver. You came, he said, voice hoarse. Grace studied him for a long moment before answering. I said I would. He swallowed. For the first time since his arrest, there were no cameras, no lawyers, no board members, no audience, just them, and the truth. I didn't think you'd really do it, Howard said finally. Grace tilted her head slightly. Do what? Finish it, he said. Take everything. Grace's eyes didn't harden. They softened, which was worse. I didn't take everything, she replied. I took what you were using to hurt people. Howard scoffed weakly. You destroyed me. Grace shook her head. No, she said calmly. I stopped protecting you. That landed harder than any accusation. Howard leaned forward, breath fogging the glass. "You planned this," he said, "years, maybe longer." Grace didn't deny it. "I planned for the day I'd need to be believed." Silence stretched between them. Howard laughed quietly. "I used to think you were boring," he said. "Predictable, safe." Grace's mouth curved, not into a smile, but something close. "I let you," she said, "because men like you never fear what they don't respect." Howard's voice cracked. "They look at me here," he whispered, "like I'm already dead." Grace listened, didn't interrupt. "They know," he continued, "what I did, what they say I did. I don't sleep, I don't eat. Every sound feels like a threat." He swallowed hard. "I'm scared." There it was. Not anger, not arrogance. Fear, pure and naked. For a moment Grace said nothing. Then she spoke. "So was I." Howard blinked. "So was Leo," she continued, her voice steady but low. "Every time your footsteps got loud, every time your temper snapped, every time he learned to hold his breath in his own house." Howard looked away. "I never meant—" Grace cut him off gently. "Intent doesn't erase impact." He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his face, silent, humiliating. "I don't have anything left," he whispered. "No money, no company, no name." Grace leaned closer to the glass. "That's not true." He looked up, hope flickering despite himself. "You still have the truth," she said, "and the rest of your life to sit with it." The hope died. "I got your letter," Howard said quickly. "The drawing." Grace nodded. "He wanted you to have it," she said. "He doesn't remember everything anymore. The therapist says that's good." Howard's voice broke completely. "Does he hate me?" Grace thought carefully before answering. "No," she said. "He doesn't understand you." A pause. "And one day that will be your mercy." Howard pressed his forehead against the glass. "I would give anything to go back," he whispered. Grace stood. "That's the one thing you don't get to buy." She placed the receiver back on the hook. Howard panicked. "Wait," he said. "Grace, please, just tell me, did you ever love me?" Grace paused, turned back. "Yes," she said. "That's why I waited." Then she walked away. The door closed behind her with a final echoing click. Howard didn't scream, didn't rage, didn't threaten. He sat there long after the guards told him time was up, because there was nothing left to negotiate. 6 months later, the sentencing was swift. No theatrics, no surprises. The judge read the charges, the evidence, the consequences. Howard Archibald was sentenced to 25 years. No early release. No special conditions. As the gavel fell, Howard didn't react. He had already heard the verdict long before that day. A year later, the city barely remembered his name, but they remembered hers. Grace Corey stood on a stage beneath soft lights, applause rolling like distant thunder. The foundation she'd built now helped hundreds, quiet people with loud truths waiting to be heard. She wore green, not gray, never gray again. In the front row sat Leo, legs swinging, smiling without fear. Grace met his eyes, smiled back. That was the victory. Not money, not power, not revenge. Freedom. That night, alone on her balcony, Grace looked out at the city. She thought of the woman she had been, the one who stayed quiet because she thought silence was survival. She understood now. Silence isn't survival. Silence is strategy. And when used correctly, it ends wars. Grace turned off the lights, closed the door, and left the past exactly where it belonged, behind her.